Okay. Good afternoon. I would like to welcome you to our October briefing, our monthly briefing, which we, as you know, run every last Tuesday month at between 1 o'clock and 2 o'clock Central European Time. We have colleagues here in Geneva in the room, and remote participants or e-participants. That there was controversy of labeling it as a remote. You should be as present as we are. Have best regards and welcome to our colleagues worldwide. I guess that most of you have been following the extremely busy month of October with numerous internet governance and digital policy activities. And today we will follow our usual patterns. We'll go briefly through the main events. We'll explore the barometer, trying to see what was the pressure comparing to the previous month. Then go through the main events in our barometer, and at the end outline the developments that we can expect next month. There were the main purpose is to put together all various threads and make as coherent picture about digital policy as it is possible, because there are so many diverse developments. Now, Arvind, please, next slide. You have the copies of the Internet Governance Barometer. As you can see, we are pointing up to those developments where we can increase of the pressure, IG pressure from the previous month. Therefore, there is no indication about whether this pressure is positive or negative. We are just referring to the increasing relevance of discussion on the specific issues comparing to the previous month. Next slide, Evan. And we will now go through each of these points one by one, and referring basically to the main developments, why we put them on the list. Next one. Here is one thing which I try to avoid, is to have the PowerPoint with with text-intensive PowerPoint. We usually use images, but this is the fact. The previous month was extremely busy, starting with Human Rights Council. Human Rights Council, as you know, has been increasing coverage of digital-related issues on online privacy, freedom of expression, rights of people with disabilities. Other events, we can go through the list, but I would like to highlight a few major events. One was the IT Telecom World. During the previous week, we had the coincidence of basically 3 key events. 2 with extremely high relevance for digital politics in New York, versus +10 consultations, ICANN meeting in Dublin, and there was more pro-development, sort of development-focused ITU Telecom in Budapest. Therefore, it was a difficult week for all of the officials involved in the digital policy. And I can tell you, I've been in touch with a few colleagues who are managing the calendars of their ministers and director generals, and it was the sort of terrible week for the following of all of these 3 events. We will be referring later on to New York event versus +10, what's happened in New York during this negotiation, and ICANN Dublin event. And that's more or less the general summary. On the Diplo side, we have today survival guide for radio frequency diplomacy training after this briefing, and on Thursday, Friday, tomorrow, we have the OSCE capacity confidence building measures meeting in Belgrade with the interesting simulation exercise. What happens if country is disconnected from the internet completely? We'll have the in vivo exercise with the OSCE member states from Canada to on the other side, well, who's on the other side of the Russia, I guess, yes. And there with Euro-Atlantic coverage. Next, please. Okay, we'll start with the global IG architecture. What were the major developments in shaping the overall global internet governance architecture? And as you know, there was a preparatory meeting for versus +10, second preparatory meeting, which was held in New York. Just to give you the brief, broader context for those of you who are new in the following these issues. Versus World Summit on Information Society was held in 2005, 2003, Geneva, 2005, Tunis. in 2005, Tunis agenda was adopted, and more or less the current arrangement in dealing with digital policy issues was set in Tunis in 2005. Now, 10 years later, the government, civil society, business, and other actors are revisiting conclusions in Tunis, conclusions from Tunis. We have had many developments. Well, I think Twitter didn't exist, or Facebook was just established when there was a summit in Tunis. Now we have to see if the current arrangement that we have, the Tunis arrangement, is sufficient to facilitate further growth of the internet. Therefore, that's the major context. There was the zero draft, which was published on the, I think, 8th of October, which was the first draft. We did analysis of the zero draft, which was quite balanced and document reflecting different views. And it was the basis for the discussion which was held last week, starting with the open consultations involving civil society, and then governments going back behind the closed doors to negotiate outcome document, which should be adopted in December. The relevance of this document is that it will set the stage for global IG architecture for at least next 5, if not 10 or even 15 years. There are different views that the next meeting will be in 5 years or in 2025, or there are views that it should be linked with the revision of the Agenda 2030 Sustainable Development Agenda. Therefore, there are three dates which are discussed. At the meeting, the major controversies were Internet governance related to Internet Governance Forum extension, which is more or less agreed. And now the question is for how long it should be extended, again, 5, 10, 15 years. There was a question, should cybersecurity remain a special chapter in the document or not? There was a question of international legal instruments. What was important, we'll revisit it later on, net neutrality came as a line in the proposal. And by the way, while we're discussing it now, European Parliament in Strasbourg, I guess, this session is in Strasbourg, is voting for European Union rules on net neutrality. Therefore, it's in a way in vivo, and I asked my colleagues to tell me what was the result of the vote when it is ready. In New York, we had the UN First Committee debates concerns over cybersecurity. China calls for international code of conduct on cyberspace. South Korea for new set of rules for cyberspace to ensure security. This is that security angle of discussion, which is becoming more and more prominent. With governments, a group of experts and other, therefore, cyber issues, overall cyber issues, are increasingly viewed through the cybersecurity angle. There were some indications or reports that Russia plans for a national information platform to reduce or eliminate dependence on Western firms and technological internet companies. Next. In cybersecurity field, the main developments with which we closed September was the China-US cyber deal. Basically, according to this deal, which is not signed on dotted line, but it is reported, there was a truce in the tension between China and the US in cyber field, mainly on the issues of the use of espionage for commercial purposes. This was the major controversy, and if you can recall, during our previous briefing, there wasn't certain if US would introduce, United States would introduce targeted sanctions against a few Chinese companies based on this. It seems that this truce was created, and there were even some indications that China quietly arrested hackers in compliance with the US government request. It is reported in the news. You have the links to all sources that I'm quoting now. Therefore, you can follow the reports in the newspaper, other places. UK, United Kingdom, and China make a similar agreement against cyber-enabled commercial espionage. According to the second report, that we haven't received anything published yet, but as you know, the Chinese president visited United Kingdom, and apparently there was some sort of strengthening of that arrangement which was made with the United States. We have a continuation of the banks and the financial institutions being a prime target for hackers. There is a report from UK National Crime Agency indicating really serious attacks on this banking infrastructure. Therefore, there is increase in relevance to cybersecurity, and we can expect continuation of this trend. Next. Well, ICANN has been around in all of our briefings as the line, what we can report from Dublin. Dublin started with, I would say, a lot of tension and concern that it may not succeed it finished on more positive and optimistic note. And stewardship transition coordination group with the question of IANA transition, therefore the supervision of the core infrastructure, is almost there in finalizing their proposal. Therefore, they have to finalize proposal to submit to the US government, which will then decide about the final step of transition. There are much more controversies about accountability. And this is an open issue. Different communities are trying to increase the accountability of ICANN, asking ultimately the question, if the US government pulls out of this supervisory role, to whom ICANN will report, to whom it should be accountable. And this is the question which is now discussed, which was discussed intensively, and most of the delegates' time and focus was on the second issue. First issue was more or less clear. Therefore, that remains an open issue, how it will be managed, this question of the ICANN accountability. Next. Again, of ICANN, and we indicated here, the issue which did gain in relevance on our barometer was more or less the same, is the controversy around the new domains. There was the registry XYZ plans to ban domain names XYZ, college, rent, protection, and security, which are blocked and censored by Chinese government, and ban to be applied internationally. WIPO also reported increase of the dispute, domain name dispute. As you know, the WIPO hosts the arbitration, uniform dispute resource procedure, which is the key and the key mechanism to dealing with the conflicts around domain names. Therefore, they reported increase in the number of cases. Next. Well, now one issue which probably together with this would compete with the cybersecurity in the highest prominence in the digital policy is online privacy and data protection. And there were few major developments. One was that the Court of Justice of European Union decided on the safe harbor agreement in Max Schrems case. Safe harbor agreement was arrangement between US government and European Union to share or to move the data across the Atlantic, basically mainly by big internet companies, ensuring that with having a safe harbor, this is the name why it is called in the United States, the rules of privacy protection, data protection that exists in European Union would apply to their data even if they are in the United States. That's more or less the arrangement. Now, European Court of Justice basically challenged this adequately, arguing that European Commission failed to examine if the United States provided the proper protection. Not even arguing about the level of protection, which is lower than in Europe, definitely, but they basically challenged that. And in another case from the last month, the TIMO case, companies operating in a country regardless of headquarters can be held accountable by country's data protection authority. Therefore, for us, living in Switzerland, if you have any concern and any dispute with the internet, let's say Facebook or Twitter, we can raise the case in Swiss court can have authority according to the ruling of the European Court of Justice. Well, not Swiss, but let's say Italian court, because Switzerland is not a member of the European Union. That's slightly different. What was the last point in this line? It's in a way not very noticeable, but extremely interesting development. It's the new California Electronic Communication Privacy Act, which increases the level of protection of privacy in California. And as you know, most of the internet industry is concentrated in California. Therefore, it is an interesting development which domestically could push the higher level of protection of privacy in the United States. All in all, online privacy and data protection is going to be very, very high on the agenda, and we can expect continuous probably this competition between cybersecurity and online privacy and data protection in the forthcoming period as the most prominent issues. Next. Net neutrality. Net neutrality has been around for quite some time. It was discussed by academics, by civil society, by different actors, but it was one of those issues that you discuss but you don't bring into the policy forum because it's too complex. The issue by its nature is extremely complicated. And the first major change in this respect on national level was the decision of the Federal Communication Commission in the United States to impose net neutrality to protect it as official in the United States. It happened, if you can recall, in February this year. Now, we had the two major developments, or possibly three, depending on the voting now in Strasbourg. The first one was that Latin American countries insisted to include net neutrality into the versus plus 10 draft. To tell you the truth, it was a big surprise because that's one of those open issues that you don't know how to handle. That was the first development. The second one was that it was basically, it is not listed here, but it's in your documents, is that Interparliamentarian Union adopted a declaration during their meeting last week here in Geneva, Declaration on Data Protection, Cybersecurity and Democracy, and they have explicit in para 4, Richard drew my attention to this, they have explicit relevance to net neutrality. Now, if we have the stronger rules on net neutrality today coming from Brussels, from the Strasbourg, we can expect that net neutrality is gradually, but steadily moving to the top on the diplomatic agenda. That's one. Let's say if we have to use this crystal ball exercise, this is one of the issues which is gaining momentum. Next, please. Two courts on jurisdiction issues, the two court cases that I mentioned, the case of Veltimo and Max Schrem's ruling of the European Court of Justice have really significant relevance for the question of jurisdiction of the Internet. In both cases, as you can see, the court ruled that users of the Internet have a right to raise their cases in their countries of their domicile of their residence, regardless the incorporation of the Internet companies which is holding their data. That means that you can initiate court in your respective countries against Facebook, Twitter, Google, and other actors. And it is also a remarkable development. Next. E-commerce with the Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement got into the focus and on the few issues. One is the question of protection of the data and the content. The second is balance between human rights and the e-commerce. As you know, the Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement, I guess it involves 14 countries, United States, Japan, Southeast Asia countries. And it has quite a prominent, quite important section on Internet-related issues. And there are now, especially in civil society, quite a loud comments on the risk of derogation of the human rights, the question of bypassing the juridical authorities in the question of investment and other issues related to trade in this case. There was European Union Directive on Alternative Dispute Resolution for consumer disputes in the force, again strengthening the role of consumers. And this is a constant trend in the European Union policy in this field, strengthening the rights, legal rights of the users or consumers on the Internet, with the possibility to use dispute resolution and others. Commonwealth Central Bank raised the question of the virtual currency. There is a growing concern of what to do with virtual currencies, Bitcoin and other tools. Next. That was basically the summary of the previous month. What can we expect during the month of November? there will be World Radio Communication Conference here in Geneva. It will make quite few of you very busy during the month of November, following your delegations coming from capitals, and we'll have a training in the afternoon, survival kit for radio communication diplomacy. Then you will have a UNESCO meeting, which will have a prominent IT agenda. Few other events focusing on cybercrime in Japan, Internet Governance Forum in Brazil, which is annual meeting of Internet Governance Forum, G20 summit in Antalya, and there are indications that the internet may come on the agenda of a G20 summit in Antalya. Then in Geneva we'll have a Business and the Human Rights Forum in mid-November, and there will be also a summit, Jovan summit in Malta, Commonwealth Heads of State summit at the end of the month, where the internet will be one of the issues, e-commerce and the use of the internet by different communities. This is more or less the list. What we can, when we zoom out, what we can expect. Definitely the clear development is related to data protection. That will continue. The question of cybersecurity in the build-up for the meeting, the versus+10 meeting in mid-December. ICANN will remain high on the policy agenda, but I would say that focus probably will be shifting more and more towards versus+10, because it has to be concluded somehow with the final document in mid-December. Next. Okay, from our side, we always keep the short segment about what is going on at our side. We have a digital watch website, which is now have the new update feature, and Arvin may just show this feature. Okay, it's a new feature on the website. I'm sure that you're familiar, and you're using it every day. And here is, for example, latest updates. You probably heard about internet undersea cables. It is now in the media, the question of the protection of undersea cables. Therefore, you have the latest updates on each of these issues: cybersecurity, data protection, and you can subscribe via mailing list to be alerted if there is any major developments related to the issues of your direct concern. You can go back. We'll have a monthly digital watch newsletter. On Thursday, I will have a briefing, executive briefing with heads of missions at the UN, summarizing the main developments on the versus, ICANN, and other digital issues. Therefore, if your heads of missions will be there, you will probably hear another summary of the events from that briefing. Next, please. Yeah, time for your questions and suggestions. I'm always concerned with this briefing because it has to be very informative. I have to make sort of avalanche of data and information, and then I say, okay, but I always prefer to have a broader picture, but I think it is relevant for your work also to have the pointers to the concrete information events and developments. And we will keep tradition of having the first question from whom? Richard Hill. Richard, please.
For the technical reason?
Okay, yes. Question or comment, Richard?
Yeah, thank you. No, I think it's a very on this one. On the witness, I didn't follow it in live how he did. I did read all the submissions, some of which were only published just today, back to a public late. But it seems to be we're really seeing a polarization, which is, I think, even worse than this which is with the D77 plus China on one side, with Russia, and then the OECD on the other side, and they're taking really very different views of every single piece, like multilateralism, dictator, unrestricted, and so on. I wonder whether you or anybody else can comment on that, because for now it doesn't seem like that is rather look at the comments from the individual member states looking
Yeah, well, just for our online community, Richard Hill commented that based on the latest news from the New York, there is more divergence than convergence when it comes to the versus pasta negotiations. And he asked about the comments on this. We did a bit of a preliminary analysis based on what was publicly available or what was heard from delegations. And here is sort of general summary, what were the controversial issues. On the IGF continuation, there are the differences of 5, 10, 15 years, with the most G77 countries on 5 years, and US and Japan on 15 years. China was asking for multilateral accountable process for IGF. India was asking for strengthening of the IGF. On the review process, what's after the December, US is basically focusing that on the use of existing process, CSTD plus ECOSOC, while the other countries are looking for either link to 2025 summit, next summit, versus summit, or a link to SDGs, the review on 2030, for example, that came from European Union as a proposal to have to more converge the versus summit with SDGs processes. On the new mechanism versus existing, India asked for the mechanism for consultation of governments, and Latin American countries, UN Committee on ICT to be part of the versus. It was a bit vague, but it was again, US insisted that the existing mechanism CSTD is sufficient. On multi-stakeholder versus multilateral, basically, rhetorically speaking, all actors are supporting more or less all actor multi-stakeholder approach, but the difference is when it are in details. What should be respective roles and responsibilities of various actors. On international legal framework, G77 for China called for improvements, and US, Japan, EU, Canada, Australia asked for use of existing legal framework. That's it. On human rights, quite strong opposition from China, not to be emphasized by Group 77, separate section by European Union, and there are different views. If there are, that was interesting controversies. You know from the document Zero Draft, there is a section of Internet governance on development, Internet governance, human rights, and cybersecurity. And quite a few delegations insisted on removing the sections and putting everything into one sort of pot. Therefore, reducing, for example, US asked to reduce to not to have cybersecurity as a section, which a separate section. On cybersecurity, there was a sort of a proposal by US to reduce the relevance of cybersecurity in the document. China insisted that to have it prominently. G77 to have a legal instrument on cybersecurity. Enhanced cooperation, EU inclusive dialogue. G77 are asking for new proposals, some of them. Internet as a global public good, LAC countries, Latin American, Caribbean. Net neutrality also pushed by Latin American and Caribbean countries. Critical information infrastructure, India insists to have a more stronger language in the versus document. On the development, bridging digital divide through capacity building European Union, greater focus on development security G77 than China. Delete the para on the Digital Security Fund United States, keep this para and provide more clarity. India arguing that it is not fair to judge Digital Security Solidarity Fund on the failure since it wasn't operational. This is more or less a summary on SDGs. There is a unanimity. This is one point that everybody is supportive of linking it to SDGs with different modalities. For example, European Union trying to converge two processes by 2030, and other countries having the different views. That's probably one clear continuation of IGF is one common point. depending, and then the other one is linked to the SDGs. While on the other point, I agree there are quite a few divergent points. We have a question from remote participant, from the, not remote, e-participant.
Yes, this is remote moderator speaking. We have an update just that you were covering the European Parliament vote that actually first from a tweet coming from MEP Julia Reda, who tweeted it was the first source because that the amendments were refused, and now it has been confirmed by more official channels that the telecom market was approved but not implemented. And then we have a few questions. There was an interesting discussion on net neutrality when you explained it's a very complex issue. So I encourage the others to ask, is this a complex issue? And Williams answered it exactly the problem. This is a complex issue. So Jovan, if you were to explain to a 6-year-old net neutrality problem.
Can we play the James Olivier comic when there was the, I will send you the link in the follow-up, the famous comedian from the United States. He did really great comic. Well, the question for 6 years old, oh, that's that. Probably I would just play that comic. The question is to preserve the principle. Principle is already a heavy word for 6 years old. To have the internet as usable as we have it now, in order to have a fun, to use it, to have it continuing developing and not being controlled by parents as much as kids do not want. Therefore, that's possibly the element of innovation, element of control, and the element of human rights. You have more or less 3 or 4 building blocks why it makes it extremely difficult. And if you add to the complexity, it's extremely difficult on international level. Because this is in a way it's not surprising the vote in Brussels against net neutrality, because European telecommunication industry wants to have bigger share of the internet revenue cake. Their argument is that all income from the internet, most of the income is going to the companies which are outside the European Union, and they have to lay the cables and to maintain the infrastructure. Now, it is simplified argument. There are counter-arguments, but it seems that they were very successful in lobbying the parliamentarians in order to have a different rules and to challenge the question of net neutrality on European level. Otherwise, you can see the discussion is becoming heated. There will be, the whole space will be like kaleidoscope moving with the different views, with different positions. Well, 6 years old, the test, I almost passed. Huh? Okay. Well, they're gentle and kind with me. Richard, you had a comment. Maybe you can just. Richard, he'll.
I just want to say, if you actually look carefully if the amendments were refused within the party, what they actually passed in terms of neutrality is half of what the English IT company buy in the European Union, in Dubai. So 3 years later, the actually rejected.
And for example?
It's the special arrangement paragraph. It's allowing telecom operators to start differential for special arrangements. So that has been listed by the European Union.
Okay. Concretely speaking, what does it mean? I'm sure that most of you who are here in the room, I guess, from the list of
I'm not sure why we don't hear Richard at all when he speaks.
Okay, let me just comment quickly. We had some technical problems with net neutrality here in the conference room in Geneva, and Richard made a comment that basically the proposal which was adopted today contains half of the provisions from the Dubai meeting, wicked meeting in 2012. Half of the ethno proposals from 2012. Therefore, in a way, ethno managed the telecommunication industry to push through their views on the net neutrality, which are basically that they should be allowed to charge different fees depending on the special services. Yes. Okay.
Thank you for clarifying this.
Who is commenting? Thank you, Mohammed.
Thank you.
Excellent. Well, that's. If you don't have any comment or question here, could you please? You can just speak and I'll. You're referring to net neutrality? Good. We have a question here about the role of Switzerland and the applicability of European decisions. Obviously, Switzerland is not a member of the European Union, and decisions of European Parliament or European Court of Justice do not apply to Switzerland. However, in many substantive issues, through the cooperation arrangement, Switzerland, for example, has a safe harbor agreement with the United States, similar to one that the European Union has. There are high-level coordination meetings between the European Union and Switzerland. Therefore, there are different tools and mechanisms. On the question of net neutrality, what we just referred to is that net neutrality moved from, let's say, IGF forum-style discussions or academic meetings to the policy process. Now, it is in versus +10. If it is included in the final document, it will be the part of the next process. There will be meetings, decisions, probably some recommendations, maybe even international legal instruments, but it is now placed into the global policy process.
I have a question regarding net neutrality, if you don't mind.
Okay, Mohammed, go ahead.
How can I draw the MENA, Middle East and North Africa governments towards net neutrality apart from Dubai or apart from UAE?
Could you repeat and be a bit louder, and I will stand next to the...
How can I bring the Middle East region to the net neutrality concept? I mean, because, I mean, it's ambiguous here in the Middle East, such as concepts.
Well, there are probably three levels. One is the national level, what's happened in the United States, in Slovenia, Netherlands, few countries which adopted internal law promoting the net neutrality. The second level is the regional level, what we just heard, well, or if European Union is a region, is a supranational organization, whatever, but on the regional level you can have it. Council of Europe had a few recommendations of the ministerial meetings on the net neutrality. And third level is global level, what's happened now with versus +10 and these parliamentarians meetings in Geneva. This is now coming on the global level. I guess the best way for the region, for the MENA region, is to refer to the versus developments or interparliamentarian union developments and to start discussion within the regional IGF, within the Arab Union and all regional organizations which are increasingly also covering digital issues. You know how it works. In the first phase, there is a need for discussion, awareness building. This discussion in Europe on net neutrality, which now finalized in very clear policy positions and political positions, started 5 or 6 years ago with academic discussions, policy consultations. You need the time in order to, in a way, facilitate different views, and then people position themselves according to. Now, when you ask politicians, I was recently in one parliamentarian meetings in Eastern European country, and you ask them about net neutrality, they don't have a clue. What is in it for me? Why is it, how is it going to affect my vote? Therefore, that's probably the phase which would be needed sometime, maybe shorter period to foster the policy discussion. Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, that's right. Because the thing is, I was wondering how can I bring such a debate into the Egyptian society here about the net neutrality, and you give me like a brief summary about the scenario that should happen in our society, but still I don't know how I should push the discussion in my community. I mean, I do believe it's governmental level, and I don't have access to such officials.
You know, one thing on the net neutrality, there is very vibrant academic civil society community around this issue. You have very many researchers doing research, many civil society organizations doing advocacy. Therefore, the question of net neutrality is present, and I would say through the international networks of academia, researchers, discussion could start in Egypt, and probably this is the way to sensitize, to make the decision makers aware, and then they can decide, like Europeans decided this afternoon, European Parliament, they decided against net neutrality. But the key is to have informed decision. What is at stake? What are the positions? How it can affect the position of the country, different constituencies. And I guess the best way would be to start with this awareness building and academic events, and then in that way to foster the policy discussion. Okay.
Yeah,
could you? You have a strong voice.
Wondering if you maybe know more about this communication policy, because to me it's absolutely interesting. In Europe, you have this tendency to bring the ID issues after the international state, international organization, and what they have done in the United States, they just decentralize it data, so they put it in terms of one region and see how it works. And do you think this is a good solution and a good approach, considering that we have for years the discussion about multi-stakeholder, nobody doesn't really know what exactly it is? Would we say that is a kind of example of what multi-stakeholder report should be?
Well, Nikolai, excellent question. There is in a way, statement that internet is global and the policy solution should be global. That applied till Copenhagen summit to climate change. The statement was climate change is global, we can only solve it with a global policy solution. And climate change community, after the failure in Copenhagen in 2009, they changed their approach. They started using the local initiative, national initiative, regional initiative. It is not yet, and we are in the building where the climate change community is based, bless you. They move to the more national and other initiatives. And I think we have to follow that lesson from climate change community. A lot can be done on a national level. And moreover, internet is a global facility, but very often internet policy is very local, because it reflects the priorities of society, it reflects the social context, it reflects economical development. I was recently in Asia. Question of privacy protection was not important at the meeting, it wasn't as important as it is in Europe. But when we started discussion data protection and the financial implication of the use of the data, then quite a few delegates in the room started being active and said that we didn't know that there is money in it. And you see, the local internet policy, as you indicated, is very often very local, reflecting the local priorities. And I expect that in the forthcoming period, we'll have more and more local initiatives. This initiative is important because it basically states, and we'll share this data with you, that bars any state law enforcement agency or other investigating entity cannot put the pressure on business to turn over any metadata or digital communication without a proper juridical warrant. That's quite important. We have now comment.
Just totally restricted scope. It doesn't federal authority, it's like their power. You know, in the U.S. you have overlapping jurisdictions, so this does not prevent the NSA.
Therefore, we'll have more and more of this local developments and the bottom-up development of different solutions on digital policy.
They are rather motivated to be adopted for the highest level. Like now with IPU talking about it, but you don't have so many states or regions talking about that, and you have as well. I mean, you could talk on the behalf of all the European Union, but what is important, for example, for Netherlands, it might not be important for Romania. So you have like a whole blind people voting. It's like what is we're facing right now in the I want to see that in the United States, it's like, okay guys, we could not do that federally, but we could take one small part of that, make it locally, and benefit itself, because otherwise, if you just make that, why for Europe it's so important to have it, I don't know, at the corpus level, in the federal, and why not coming back to, there is no endeavor for coming deeper down to the states, rather than keep it so high, and why those trials are not only local jurisdiction, local judicial system, why are they only at the top? Why we will have to discuss only with the European Union? Why not discuss with Poland or Germany?
Well, there are 3 or 4 questions that implied in your comments. One is, why do we need to discuss it on the global level? I think certain level of coordination is needed, at least on the level of principles, if not on the level of more executive, concrete norms. Therefore, you need some sort of coordination. However, the idea that you have to have the global arrangement, by all means, is, in my view, wrong. You can do a lot on the regional level. You can do a lot on the national level. And there are activities on national level. There are core decisions. And I was surprised recently to learn in Eastern Europe, there are quite a few core decisions in the Balkans, court cases. I'm a lawyer by training, a friend of mine. I asked him, well, listen, have you discovered the internet? I said, what, discovered? He told me he had 3 cases involving internet issues in the court in Belgrade, which is not that high-tech place. And he told me that in the whole region there are more and more cases. Therefore, there are these elements. Now, European Union, this is the second question, is a specific case. It's supranational integration. It has the free flow of, so far, people, goods, and it has these pillars of the European Union. And all of these pillars are, in a way, affected by digital. Therefore, European Union, if it wants to keep its level of integration, has to have more integration in digital field, not to have the separate data jurisdictions, for example, or the customer protection. And this is the field where European Union integration is a bit slow comparing to the other European integration processes. Therefore, European Union is different, and this is the reason why Google and Facebook have a strong lobbyist offices in Brussels, because by lobbying the Brussels, you lobby the market of 500 million people. Now, this is a difference between general and the European Union. Okay, good. Thank you very much for your comments. Special thanks to our e-participants for their comments, patience, and discussion. And we will be seeing each other on 24th of November. This last Tuesday falls a bit early for our November briefing on digital policy. Till then, fasten your seat belts and good luck with navigating digital policy field. Thank you. No. Okay, there was a question if we are planning anything on the COP in Paris, the climate change negotiation meeting. We don't do it. We are even in the past we did something in climate change, but now we are so immersed in the digital that you don't have institutional capacity, human capacity to follow another complex field. But it's great that you're involved in this. Thank you. Have a nice day.